Letter 4. Building a Bridge. Dear Lady Mary, in the letter you wrote to Abbot describing the last leg of your overland journey through Europe to Constantinople, you mentioned staying overnight in Silivri and Büyükçekmece. Those two towns are famous for their fine Ottoman bridges, which impressed you as much as they do travelers today. The rest of our journey was through fine painted meadows by the side of the Sea of Marmara, the ancient Propontis. We lay the next night at Silivria, anciently a noble town. It is now a very good seaport and neatly built enough, and has a bridge of 32 arches. We lay the next night at a town called or Great Bridge, and the night following at Küçükçekmece, Little Bridge, in a very pleasant lodging, formerly a monastery of dervishes, having before it a large courtyard encompassed with marble cloisters, with a good fountain in the middle. The prospect from this place and the gardens round it are the most agreeable I have seen, and shows that monks of all religions know how to choose their retirements. Both the Büyükçekmece Bridge over the Marmara Sea, with its distinctive peaked arch, and the Silivri Bridge have been commissioned from the court architect Sinan by Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, right before his death in 1566. Most certainly the troops of Sultan Ahmet III that you saw in Adrianople, Edirne, had crossed over them earlier on their journey to the battlefields of Austria, on their way to fight in the very war for which your husband was trying to broker a peace treaty. The persistent dream of the Turks to expand their influence in Europe has never let up since the glorious days when those two arched bridges were built. I am curious about your impressions of those bridges, because Turkish bridges have played a particular role in my life. At the same time I encountered those talking stones in the university amphitheater, another incident happened that could not have been a mere coincidence, and served as one more signpost on the road leading to Turkey. When I first moved to Paris as a young student, I needed a job to pay for my living expenses, and I had the good fortune of finding one in a firm that did translations for the top French civil engineering corporations. I worked with teams of engineers, cranking out French to English translations of such highly demanding documents as industry codes, calls for tenders, building standards, bids, construction documents, and the like. It was all very cut and dry, but I liked the precision of it, the exactness, and the clarity. In many ways, I think this experience fed into my decision to choose librarianship as a profession. When I started off with this firm, I was still very green, new to France, to the French language, and to the adult world of work, and a little scared. The first translation project I was assigned was thus a major step for me to prove my capabilities. When I was told that I would be working on bid documents for the construction of a bridge, I felt an immediate sense of identification with the project and my own need to build bridges to France and to adulthood. But this was not just any bridge. It was to be a bridge across one of the most famous waterways in the world, the Bosphorus Strait in Istanbul, Turkey. Not the first momentous one built in 1973, but a second one, farther to the north. Of course, I knew my geography, but that night I took out my map and looked closely at the spot where it was to be built. Certainly, the coincidence of its location, there in that land of the talking stones I had just seen in class, was not lost on me. Over the next months, we worked hard on those bid documents, which constituted the submission portfolio by one of France's leading construction firms for this major international construction project. The millions of dollars involved in the project staggered me. The scale of the construction, the amount of metal, the bearing loads, the savant calculations were all dizzying for me. Even though I come from a big country used to building big things, I had never encountered firsthand a project of such an overwhelming scale. At night, when I returned home, after hours of translating stress factors and load-bearing equations, I would pull out books and study images of this Bosphorus Strait and tried to answer some questions that kept nagging me about my involvement in the project. What impact was my bridge going to have? How would it change the lives of the people on each side of it? Was I stomping on these people just like the huge pylons were going to trample the Judas trees on the banks of the Bosphorus? Was it going to be respectful of the history and the natural setting and place? What were the leaders of the country trying to say with this project? I looked at old and new photographs, as well as the famous late 18th century series of etchings by Melling, and tried to make some sense of the history and the context of the area. The old lithographs depicting calm waters and lazing wooden cack-boats, and the modern world of rushing cars full of people and rumbling trucks full of goods could not have been more dissimilar. Yet the more I read about the country of Turkey, its history and its dreams, the more I began to understand that this bridge was more than a channel for cars and people. It was to be a conduit of ideas and values. It symbolized progress for this country. It was to be the golden spike of this transcontinental road linking Asia to Europe. And so I began to associate the ambition and vastness of this bridge project with the land in which it was to be built. I suddenly felt a part of something very momentous, the birthing of a powerful country, and that my little participation would have an impact on the lives of those people who would cross this bridge daily, on the country in whose pylons it sat, and for the world of ideas that would travel over it from the east to west and vice versa. I eagerly read about the history of this people, and especially about the man for whom the bridge was to be named, Sultan Mehmet Fatah, the conqueror of Byzantium in 1453. I realized how this bridge was destined to continue the vision of greatness and expansion that he had started. It was also the fulfillment of the aspirations of other great men to follow, namely Suleiman the Magnificent and Ataturk, as well as those of leaders of the modern Turkish Republic. I understood that its people are still identified 260 years later with Fatah's same spirit. As a daughter of the pioneer Midwest, I could understand and admire that ambition. I wanted to know more about these eager builders. I began to dream of crossing the bridge with them. So you can see, Lady Mary, how I lived the story of this Fatah Bridge on a very personal level. I feel a kinship with this country, so eager to modernize itself, just as my own continually does. I was rooting for them. I felt connected to those people who would one day cross my bridge, and I imagined how they would feel at that moment when they could turn their heads and look at both the east and western horizons, as well as at the ribbon of blue, watery silk beneath them. All the while I was working on those documents, I began to think as well of the construction project of my own life. This project became a touchstone for the questions I was starting to struggle with in my passage from a young taker to a productive adult giver. Did I want to be a bridge builder to connect cultures? Did I want to help people cross from one place to another? Did I want to physically build things like my builder father had? Did I want to be a translator of other people's creativity, or to be an artist myself? I suppose you asked yourself these same questions, Lady Mary, when you started out on your career as a writer. What was the catalyst that made you pick up the pen in the first place? What gave you the courage and impetus to forge ahead with your literary endeavors, despite the social stricture in which you lived? Well, whatever that catalyst was for you, it appears that for me, it was a Turkish bridge. Unfortunately, the French company in question did not win the contract to build the Fatah Bridge, but they and I went on to build other ones, as well as hospitals in Africa and universities in Saudi Arabia. Yet no translation documents ever thrilled me, satisfied me, or affected me as much as those for that bridge over the Bosphorus. When all the bid documents were completed and sent off, I knew I had accomplished more than a translation. I had found the yardstick to measure the rest of my life. Yes, I wanted to build things and feel that resulting power and sense of accomplishment. Yes, I wanted to help people cross from one bank to another over a bridge of understanding. Most of all, I knew that Turkey would somehow be a significant part of my life. Much has been written since about this Fatih Bridge and its obvious symbolism for the many elements of the bilateral tug-of-war that has played in the heart of every Turk for centuries. East-West, Old-New, secular Muslim, Europe-Asia, Ottoman heritage, Ataturkian vision, peasants, savants, poverty-wealth, and urban rule. This symbolism still preoccupies them today, and this bridge keeps asking the same nagging question: which side do you stand on? The double steel cables that suspend this bridge are strong and flexible at the same time, much like the various geographic, linguistic, political, economic, and religious issues currently exerted on the Turkish Republic. In the end, however, bridges are symbols of power. He who commands access to a bridge exerts the prevailing strategic hold. In this fashion, Istanbul has positioned itself, via this bridge, to become the central pinion of the European and Asian chain. And so you see, Lady Mary, why I asked you about your impressions of those bridges at Silivri and Büyükçekmece. You were then, like me, and like the country of Turkey, at the time those Ottoman bridges and the Fatih Bridge were being built, at the start of a new life. You did not know what was on the other side of that 32-arched bridge, or to where the road on the other side would lead. But you did know, by the very fact that a bridge had been built there, that the other side was worth reaching. And that is what makes crossing a bridge so thrilling. Sincerely yours, K.A. Branning.